December 7, 1941. 7:55 a.m. Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The sky is impossibly blue. Seaman First Class Harold Bergman is standing on the deck of the USS West Virginia, squinting into the sunlight, when the first explosion rips the morning apart. He feels it before he understands it. A deep, concussive thud that travels through steel and bone alike. Across the harbor, a column of water and flame erupts beside the USS Oklahoma. "Those aren't ours," someone shouts. Overhead, aircraft scream low. Silver fuselages. Red circles bright against their wings. The rising sun insignia flashes in the glare as Nakajima B-5N torpedo bombers drop to wavetop height. A torpedo hits West Virginia with a metallic shriek. The deck jumps under Harold's boots. You can smell it now. Burning oil, cordite, saltwater churned by violence. The harbor becomes a furnace. On Battleship Row, sailors scramble to unshroud guns never meant to fire on a Sunday morning. Some are barefoot. Some are still in undershirts. Machine guns chatter weakly against diving Aichi D-3 Aval bombers. The air is filled with falling metal and rising smoke. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, Commander-in-Chief of the Imperial Japanese Navy, is not here. He is 3,400 miles away, aboard the flagship Nagato. But this moment, this chaos, is the culmination of his gamble. Japan believes America is soft, decadent, unwilling to bleed for distant islands in the Pacific. For years, Japanese planners studied American industry and politics. They saw isolationism. They saw a divided Congress. They saw the reluctance after World War I. They saw Hollywood and jazz and assumed weakness. They believed a single crushing blow would break American will. The torpedoes keep coming. The USS Arizona explodes in a cataclysmic detonation as an armor-piercing bomb ignites her forward magazine. The blast lifts the battleship from the water. A mushroom of fire climbs 1,000 feet into the sky. Men vanish in that flash. Harold is thrown flat as another torpedo strikes West Virginia. Water pours in below deck. The ship begins to list. Across the Pacific, Japanese naval officers are confident. Their carrier strike force, 6 fleet carriers, has delivered what they consider a war-ending strike. They have crippled the U.S. Pacific Fleet in under 2 hours. In Tokyo, some officers speak openly. America will negotiate within months. But they are measuring America by European standards, by Russia in 1905, by China in the 1930s. They are not measuring Detroit. They are not measuring Pittsburgh. They are not measuring what happens when a continental industrial giant decides it is angry. At 8:10 a.m., the Arizona burns uncontrollably. At 8:19, Oklahoma begins to capsize. Men slide across tilting decks into oil-slick water. Dive bombers will overhead like hawks. Yet amid the inferno, something unexpected happens. American anti-aircraft fire grows thicker, more accurate. Sailors who have never seen combat begin firing with grim determination. Damage control parties seal bulkheads, counterflood compartments, and keep ships from sinking entirely. Even as West Virginia settles into the mud, her crew continues fighting the flames. The Japanese pilots see it. This isn't surrender. It isn't panic. It's rage. The second wave of attackers meets heavier resistance. Some aircraft are shot down. Smoke obscures targets. The element of total surprise is already slipping away. By 10 a.m., it's over. 8 battleships damaged or destroyed. Nearly 2,400 Americans dead. From a purely tactical standpoint, Japan has succeeded spectacularly. But tactically brilliant does not mean strategically wise. In Tokyo, planners calculate the blow. America has lost its Pacific battleship line. Its pride. Its deterrent. They assume morale will shatter. They assume the American public, shocked, grieving, will demand compromise. They assume a democracy cannot sustain prolonged war. What they do not see, what they cannot see from 3,000 miles away, is the line forming outside recruitment offices. They do not hear the radio broadcasts spreading fury from coast to coast. They do not grasp that a nation with 130 million people, untouched industrial capacity, and access to limitless resources has just been unified overnight. The next morning, December 8th, President Franklin D. Roosevelt will stand before Congress and call it a date which will live in infamy. But on this morning, in the smoke-choked waters of Pearl Harbor, Harold Bergman pulls a wounded shipmate from the deck of West Virginia and watches the Arizona burn. The Japanese believed this fire would end American resolve. Instead, it has just ignited it. April 18, 1942, 8:20 a.m. North Pacific Ocean. The deck of the USS Hornet pitches violently beneath Lieutenant Colonel James "Jimmy" Doolittle's boots. Salt spray lashes his face as he stares down 467 feet of carrier deck, far shorter than any runway a B-25 Mitchell was ever meant to use. Behind him, his crew waits inside the twin-engine bomber, engines roaring at full throttle. The prop wash whips signal flags into snapping ribbons. Ahead lies open ocean, and beyond that, Tokyo. The mission was supposed to launch at 650 miles. Instead, a Japanese picket boat has spotted the task force. Time is gone. The order comes from Vice Admiral William Bull Halsey aboard the nearby USS Enterprise. Launch immediately. Fuel calculations tighten like a noose. They may not have enough to reach China. Doolittle doesn't hesitate. He pushes the throttles forward. The B-25 lunges down the deck, heavy with fuel and 4 500-pound bombs. The bow rises, drops. The Mitchell nearly kisses the sea, then claws into the gray sky. One by one, 16 bombers follow. Below them, the Japanese Empire sleeps under a false sense of security. After Pearl Harbor, Japanese high command believed they had seized the initiative permanently. The American fleet was wounded. The Philippines were collapsing. Guam, Wake Island, Hong Kong, falling like dominoes. The Imperial Navy had moved with terrifying speed. Its carrier pilots were elite veterans of China, drilled in coordinated strikes unmatched anywhere in the world. Officers believed their spirit Bushido made them superior to any Western foe. They studied American culture and saw softness. Too much comfort. Too much debate. They believed Americans lacked endurance. Now, just 4 months after Pearl Harbor, air raid sirens wail over Tokyo. Japanese civilians look up in disbelief as twin-engine bombers streak overhead. Anti-aircraft batteries scramble. Fighter pilots rush to intercept. Bombs fall on military targets, shipyards, oil storage facilities, factories. The physical damage is limited, but psychologically, it is devastating. Japan's home islands were supposed to be untouchable. The Imperial Navy had promised absolute defense. The myth of invulnerability shatters in seconds. In Tokyo, Prime Minister Hideki Tojo is furious. Army leaders demand answers. How did American bombers reach the capital? The answer is humiliating: carrier aviation. The same tool Japan used at Pearl Harbor has now been turned against it. Worse, the American carriers that launched the raid escape untouched. The raid forces a strategic shift. Japanese planners accelerate an operation already under discussion. A plan to lure the remaining American carriers into a decisive battle and destroy them. The target, Midway Atoll. Admiral Yamamoto believes that if he can eliminate America's carriers, the United States will finally accept defeat. Without carriers, the Pacific Fleet cannot challenge Japanese expansion. Without victories, American morale will falter. But again, they are measuring America incorrectly. Back aboard Hornet, Doolittle's aircraft disappears westward. One by one, the raiders run low on fuel. Crews bail out over China or crash land in fields and mountains. Some are captured by Japanese forces. Some are executed. Others are sheltered by Chinese civilians who will later pay a brutal price. Yet when news of the raid reaches the United States, it electrifies the nation. Headlines scream that Tokyo has been bombed. For the first time since December 7th, Americans feel something other than grief. They feel possibility. Japanese intelligence had underestimated the American capacity for rapid innovation. They assumed U.S. industry would take years to recover. Instead, shipyards are working around the clock. Factories that once built refrigerators now build bombers. Car plants produce tanks. Women fill assembly lines. By mid-1942, American carrier production accelerates. New Essex-class carriers slide down the ways at astonishing speed. Aircraft production dwarfs anything Japan can match. But in Tokyo, confidence still lingers. Japanese naval officers believe their pilots. Their training, discipline, and spirit guarantee victory in a decisive engagement. They believe Americans cannot match their skill. They believe the next battle will prove it. In early June 1942, for Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu steam toward a tiny speck of land in the Central Pacific. They expect a trap for America. They do not realize the trap is about to close on them. June 4, 1942, 10:22 a.m. 15,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean. Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey squints through the windscreen of his SBD Dauntless dive bomber. Sweat runs into his eyes despite the cold altitude. Below him, the ocean is an endless blue sheet, empty. They are low on fuel. They should turn back. But McCluskey banks slightly, following a faint wake slicing through the water far below. A lone Japanese destroyer racing north at flank speed. It is rejoining the fleet. He follows it. Minutes later, the clouds part. There they are. For Japanese carriers, flight decks crowded with aircraft, fuel hoses snaking across planks, bombs stacked for a second strike on Midway, the carriers of the Kido Butai. On the flagship Akagi, crewmen scramble to rearm planes. On Kaga, ordnance carts roll across deck. Below decks, hangars are crammed with fueled aircraft, a lethal vulnerability. Japanese commanders believe the American carriers are far away. They are wrong. At that exact moment, Japanese Zero fighters are down low, chasing American torpedo bombers skimming the waves. Those torpedo squadrons, slow, exposed, are being slaughtered. Entire units are wiped out. But their sacrifice has dragged the fighter cover away. Up here, at 15,000 feet, the sky is suddenly empty. McCluskey pushes his Dauntless over into a vertical dive. The world tilts. Air howls past the canopy as the SBD screams downward at 250 knots. The carrier deck rushes up. Men running, guns turning upward too late. Bomb release at 1,500 feet. He pulls back hard, blacking out slightly. Behind him, other Dauntless drop their payloads. On Kaga, multiple bombs detonate among fueled aircraft. A sheet of orange flame engulfs the hangar deck. Explosions chain react through the ship's interior. On Akagi, a single bomb punches through the flight deck and detonates in the upper hangar. It is enough. Soryu is hit moments later. Within 6 minutes, 3 of Japan's elite carriers are mortally wounded. Admiral Chuchi Nagumo stands stunned on Akagi's bridge. The pride of the Imperial Navy, the force that struck Pearl Harbor, is burning. Hours later, dive bombers from the USS Enterprise and USS Yorktown locate and destroy Hiryu, the last surviving Japanese carrier. For carriers gone, over 250 aircraft destroyed. Hundreds of Japan's most experienced naval aviators dead. The loss is catastrophic, not just materially, but irreplaceably. Here is where the miscalculation becomes fatal. Japanese planners believed war would be decided by spirit and decisive battle, Kantai Kessen. They assumed America would sue for peace after a few crushing defeats. But Midway proves something different. America learns fast. U.S. Navy cryptanalysts had broken key elements of Japan's naval code. They knew Midway was the target. They positioned their carriers accordingly. Japanese intelligence had dismissed the possibility that their codes were compromised. They underestimated American signals intelligence. They underestimated American industrial recovery. They underestimated how quickly new pilots could be trained, even if not as polished as Japan's early war elite. Japan's pilot training system was long and selective. It produced masters, but in small numbers. America's system would soon produce thousands. By late 1942, new American carriers enter service. New aircraft roll off assembly lines in staggering numbers. Japan cannot replace what it lost at Midway. On the burning decks of Akagi, sailors attempt to fight uncontrollable fires. Ammunition detonates. The once proud flagship is abandoned and later scuttled. The psychological balance shifts. For the first time, Japanese naval officers understand the war will not be short. Yet many still believe America lacks the will for prolonged sacrifice. They think distance will protect Japan. They think island fortresses can bleed the U.S. into exhaustion. They think the Pacific is too vast. They are about to test that theory on a jungle island called Guadalcanal. August 7, 1942, 6:14 a.m. off the coast of Guadalcanal. Rain hammers the steel decks of American transports as gray dawn bleeds into the Pacific. Private First Class John Basilone grips his rifle inside a rocking landing craft, diesel fumes mixing with the smell of wet canvas and fear. Ahead, the shoreline emerges through mist, dense jungle rising behind a narrow strip of sand. Japanese engineers have been building an airfield here. They call it Lunga Point. To the Americans, it will become Henderson Field. The ramp drops. Marines splash into waist-deep surf, rifles held overhead. Machine guns chatter from the tree line. The first American ground offensive of the Pacific War has begun. In Tokyo, the reaction is disbelief. Guadalcanal was considered secure, a forward outpost to threaten Australia and extend Japan's defensive perimeter. The Imperial Army believes the Americans lack the endurance for a drawn-out jungle campaign. They are wrong again. The Marines push inland and seize the unfinished airstrip within days. Engineers work around the clock to make it operational. Soon, a mixed group of fighters and dive bombers, the Cactus Air Force, begins flying from its coral runway. The battle becomes a brutal test of attrition. At night, Japanese destroyers roar down the slot, delivering reinforcements in what Americans call the Tokyo Express. Naval battles explode in darkness, ships firing at muzzle-flash range. In the choking jungle heat, Marines dig foxholes into mud that never dries. Malaria spreads. Supplies run thin. Rations shrink. Japanese commanders assume starvation and disease will break American morale. Instead, the Marines dig deeper. Colonel Kaineo Ichiki leads the first major Japanese counterattack, confident that a single regiment can sweep the invaders into the sea. His men charge across the sandbar at the Tenaru River in a frontal assault, bayonets fixed. Marine machine guns cut them down. Ichiki's force is annihilated. Still, Tokyo underestimates the scale of American commitment. They send more troops in piecemeal attacks, assuming superior spirit will compensate for logistical weakness. But American industry is now fully mobilized. Back in the United States, shipyards launch new destroyers and transports monthly. Liberty ships slide into the water faster than German U-boats can sink them. Aircraft production skyrockets, Wildcats, Dauntless, B-17s, and the new F-6F Hellcat rolling off assembly lines. Japan cannot match it. On Guadalcanal, the pattern becomes clear. When Japanese bombers strike Henderson Field, replacement aircraft arrive within weeks. When American ships are sunk, more sail west from California. When Marines fall, reinforcements replace them. For Japan, every lost veteran pilot, every sunk destroyer, every dead infantryman is a wound that cannot fully heal. The Battle of Guadalcanal drags on for 6 savage months. Night naval engagements like the Battle of Savo Island inflict heavy American losses, proof that Japanese sailors remain deadly. But each tactical victory costs irreplaceable men and ships. The Japanese high command believed America would recoil after suffering casualties. Instead, each casualty seems to harden American resolve further. By February 1943, Japan secretly evacuates its remaining troops from Guadalcanal. The island is lost. Strategically, it marks the turning point from expansion to defense. Yet within Japanese leadership circles, a dangerous belief persists. If they can impose enough casualties, if they can make the cost unbearable, American democracy will fracture. They believe Americans are too attached to comfort, too impatient for a long war. They believe a defensive perimeter of fortified islands will break the attacker. They are about to see what happens when American industry, logistics, and firepower combine in overwhelming force. The next proving ground will be an island called Saipan. June 15, 1944, 7:40 a.m. Saipan. The sea is black with ships. From horizon to horizon, gray hulls stretch across the Pacific. Battleships, Cruisers, destroyers, transports, the largest amphibious force Japan has ever faced. The thunder begins before the sun fully rises. 16-inch guns from the USS Iowa and USS New Jersey hurl shells inland. Each blast shakes the earth. Coconut palms snap like matchsticks. Japanese bunkers vanish under pillars of dirt and smoke. Private First Class Thomas O'Leary crouches inside a landing tractor, helmet rattling with every concussion. He has seen photographs of Tarawa, the bodies on the beach, the coral-stained dark. He knows what waits ahead. But this time is different. This time, the Americans have overwhelming firepower. Behind the bombardment line, aircraft carriers launch wave after wave of planes. Hellcats sweep the skies. Dive bombers pound artillery positions. The scale is staggering, hundreds of aircraft, coordinated with naval gunfire and landing schedules timed to the minute. Japanese commanders on Saipan watch through binoculars, stunned by the sheer mass of steel. They had believed America would struggle to project power so far west. They had believed distance would slow industrial momentum. Instead, an armada has crossed thousands of miles and arrived with precision. When the ramps drop, Marines surge ashore under heavy fire. Japanese artillery brackets the beaches. Machine guns rake the sand. Casualties mount quickly. But the Americans keep coming. Wave after wave. Reinforcements land with tanks, flamethrowers, bulldozers. Combat engineers blast open cave systems with explosives. Naval gunfire adjusts in real time via radio coordination, a level of joint operation Japan cannot match. In Tokyo, Admiral Somu Toyota launches Operation Ego, a massive fleet counterattack designed to destroy the American invasion force. It will culminate in the Battle of the Philippine Sea. Japanese naval aviation, once the pride of the empire, sorties in strength. But the pilots are not the same men who struck Pearl Harbor. Midway, Coral Sea, Guadalcanal, those veterans are mostly gone. Their replacements are brave, but rushed through shortened training programs. Flight hours are reduced. Experience is thin. On June 19, 1944, hundreds of Japanese aircraft approach the American fleet. They meet a wall. U.S. radar detects incoming waves at long range. Fighter direction officers vector F-6F Hellcats into perfect intercept positions. American pilots, better trained and increasingly combat-seasoned, tear into the formations. The result will be called the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Japanese planes fall from the sky in flames. Entire squadrons are annihilated. Few reach the fleet. By the end of the battle, Japan loses over 400 aircraft and most of its remaining carrier-trained aviators. American losses are minimal in comparison. The imbalance is now undeniable. Japan had believed spirit and courage would offset material disadvantage. But industrial war does not reward courage alone. On Saipan itself, the fighting is savage. Japanese defenders retreat into caves and launch nighttime banzai charges. Civilians, terrified by propaganda warning of American brutality, leap from cliffs rather than surrender. The cost is horrific. Yet when Saipan falls in July 1944, the strategic implications are staggering. From airfields on Saipan, American B-29 superfortresses can reach the Japanese home islands. For the first time, Japan itself is within sustained bombing range. The defensive perimeter is broken. Prime Minister Hideki Tojo resigns. The empire is on the defensive everywhere. Still, some within the Japanese military cling to a final hope. One decisive battle near the homeland that will bleed the U.S. Navy so badly that negotiations become inevitable. They will stake that hope on Leyte Gulf. And there, the last illusions about American resolve will die. October 25, 1944. 6:58 a.m. off Sommer. The horizon is wrong. Ensign Robert Copeland, captain of the destroyer escort USS Samuel B. Roberts, stares through binoculars at silhouettes emerging from the morning haze. Battleships, not one, for their pagoda masts are unmistakable. Massive guns glint in the rising sun. Among them steams the giant Yamato, the most heavily armed battleship ever built. Copeland's ship displaces 1,350 tons. Yamato displaces over 70,000. Behind Samuel B. Roberts are 6 escort carriers, slow, lightly armored ships launching support aircraft for troops landing at Leyte. They are protected by a handful of destroyers and destroyer escorts. They were never meant to face the main body of the Japanese fleet. But through a complex and desperate Japanese plan, Operation Shogo, Admiral Takeo Kurita's center force has slipped through the San Bernardino Strait and stumbled directly into Taffy 3. The Japanese believe they have finally found their decisive battle. They see small carriers and assume easy victory. They do not realize what they are about to encounter. At 7 a.m., Yamato opens fire. 18-inch shells scream overhead like freight trains. Towering geysers erupt around the American ships. Copeland turns toward the enemy. So do the others. Destroyers USS Johnston and USS Hull charge directly at the Japanese battleships, laying smoke screens to shield the carriers. This is not supposed to happen. Japanese doctrine expects the enemy to retreat. Instead, small American ships accelerate into gunfire. Johnston launches torpedoes at heavy cruiser Kumano, blowing off her bow. Samuel B. Roberts closes to within 4,000 yards of a Japanese heavy cruiser and fires until her guns glow red. Escort carrier pilots, some flying FM-2 Wildcats armed only with machine guns, dive repeatedly at Japanese ships, strafing bridges, dropping depth charges when bombs run out. They attack because there is nothing else to do. Japanese gunners are stunned by the aggression. They had been taught that Americans lack fighting spirit, that they would crumble when outmatched. Instead, these lightly armed ships fight like cornered wolves. For hours, the battle rages. Johnston is torn apart by battleship-caliber shells but keeps firing. Samuel B. Roberts is hit repeatedly. Copeland gives the order to abandon ship only after ammunition is gone and engines fail. Yet, the ferocity of the defense creates confusion in the Japanese formation. Reports exaggerate American strength. Kurita, uncertain of carrier locations and fearing air attack from larger fleet units, hesitates. Then, incredibly, he withdraws. The most powerful surface fleet Japan has ever assembled turns away from a group of escort carriers and destroyers. The decisive battle Japan sought slips through its fingers. But the deeper miscalculation is clearer now than ever. Japan believed America would negotiate if bloodied badly enough. Instead, even when hopelessly outgunned, American sailors charge battleships. Even when ships are sinking, pilots keep attacking. Even when victory seems impossible, they refuse to disengage. By late 1944, American shipyards are producing vessels faster than Japan can sink them. Essex-class carriers multiply. New fast battleships join the fleet monthly. Submarines strangle Japanese shipping lanes, starving the home islands of oil and raw materials. Japan is running out of fuel, running out of trained pilots, running out of options. The last strategy left is desperation. If Americans fear death too much to continue, if they recoil from suicide attacks, perhaps resolve can finally be shaken. In the skies over the Philippines, a new tactic begins to appear: kamikaze. And Japan is about to discover one final, devastating truth about the nation it misjudged. April 1, 1945, 8:32 a.m. Okinawa. The sea is a forest of masts. Over 1,300 American ships crowd the waters off the island, the largest amphibious assault in Pacific history. Battleships fire in rolling thunder. Carrier aircraft streak overhead in endless arcs. On the deck of the USS Bunker Hill, signalmen track incoming radar contacts. The warning comes fast. Bogies inbound. Multiple. Low altitude. They already know what that means. Kamikaze. In the cockpit of a Yokosuka D4Y Judy, a 19-year-old Japanese pilot tightens his grip on the stick. His aircraft carries a 500-kilogram bomb. He has written a farewell letter. His instructors told him this sacrifice will break American morale, that no democracy can endure waves of men willing to die deliberately. He dives. On Bunker Hill's deck, anti-aircraft guns erupt in a wall of fire. Tracers crisscross the sky. One kamikaze punches through the barrage and slams into the carrier's flight deck. The explosion is catastrophic. Fuel lines rupture. Parked aircraft ignite. Secondary blasts ripple across the deck. Sailors are thrown into the air. Burning gasoline pours through openings into lower compartments. Minutes later, a second kamikaze hits. Smoke billows thousands of feet upward. The carrier becomes an inferno. Nearly 400 sailors are killed or wounded. Across the fleet, similar scenes unfold daily. Destroyers are struck. Transports burn. Even battleships are scarred. The human cost is staggering. Japan's leaders believed this would finally break American will. Instead, something else happens. Damaged ships are towed, repaired, and returned to service within weeks. Replacement carriers continue arriving from American shipyards at a pace Japan cannot comprehend. For every aircraft Japan destroys, hundreds more roll off assembly lines in California and New York. For every pilot lost in a suicide attack, Japan loses a trained airman it cannot replace. Meanwhile, American B-29 superfortresses launch from the Marianas. Night after night, they bomb Japanese cities. On March 9 to 10, 1945, Tokyo burns in a firestorm that kills over 80,000 people. Japan is being crushed from air, sea, and land. On Okinawa, the fighting on shore is even more brutal. Japanese defenders dig into caves and tunnels, forcing Americans into a grinding battle of attrition. Casualties mount into the tens of thousands. Yet the invasion does not falter. Supply ships keep arriving. Medical evacuation chains function efficiently. Artillery ammunition never seems to run out. Japan had believed distance, spirit, and sacrifice would exhaust the attacker. But the attacker has become unstoppable. By summer 1945, the Imperial Navy barely exists. Fuel reserves are nearly gone. Factories are rubble. The defensive perimeter has collapsed entirely. Still, some Japanese leaders cling to the hope of one final climactic battle on the home islands. A defense so bloody it forces negotiation. They are still misreading their enemy. On August 6, 1945, a single B-29 named Enola Gay approaches the city of Hiroshima. What happens next will end the war and permanently prove how catastrophically Japan misjudged the United States. August 6, 1945, 8:15 a.m. Hiroshima. The sky is clear. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Tibbets steadies the controls of the Enola Gay at 31,000 feet. The city below looks peaceful. Rivers cutting through urban blocks, streetcars moving along quiet tracks, factory workers beginning their shifts. Inside the bomb bay hangs something no nation has ever used in war before. Bomb away. The aircraft jolts slightly as little boy drops free. 43 seconds later, a white flash erases the morning. On the ground, shadows are burned into concrete. Buildings collapse in a rising wall of fire and pressure. A mushroom cloud climbs into the stratosphere. In Tokyo, confusion reigns. Communications with Hiroshima vanish. Reports are fragmented, unbelievable. One bomb, one plane, one city destroyed. 3 days later, on August 9th, another B-29 Boxcar drops a second atomic bomb on Nagasaki. Between the two attacks, the Soviet Union declares war on Japan and invades Manchuria, smashing the Guangdong army in days. The final strategic illusion collapses. For years, Japan's military leadership believed America would tire, that casualties, distance, and cost would force compromise. They assumed a democracy could not sustain industrial war at scale. But by 1945, the United States has produced over 300,000 aircraft, 100,000 tanks, and thousands of ships. It has fought across 2 oceans simultaneously. It has replaced fleets, retrained armies, and absorbed losses without political fracture. Every assumption Japan made in 1941 has been disproven. They underestimated American industrial capacity. They underestimated American adaptability, code-breaking, radar integration, joint operations. They underestimated the speed of recovery after Pearl Harbor. They underestimated the depth of public resolve once attacked. On August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito speaks on the radio for the first time in history. His voice is